Rage is quite a powerful and popular skill in Dark and Darker. It gives the Barbarian a movement speed buff that can compete with Sprint and Haste, and it boosts their strength by 50%. The trade-off here is that it reduces your defense by 20%. On the surface, this seems like a pretty reasonable trade of risk and reward. A quick, powerful burst of lethality at the cost of taking more damage. But this description doesn't tell the whole story. You see, strength is actually responsible for two things. One is your physical power bonus, which dictates how much extra damage you do with physical attacks. But the other is your maximum HP. This HP boost follows a bit of a weird curve, but the general rule of thumb is that for every 1 extra strength you have, you're going to get 2 more max HP. Now, you can get strength from gear, but there also exist many temporary strength boosts. Drinking Ale, Casting Bless, and the aforementioned Rage skill are all temporary boosts on a timer. Temporary HP buffs raise a question that the developers had to answer. What should happen when the HP buff runs out? More specifically, what should happen when the HP buff runs out and the player lost health during the buff? Should the damage they took simply transfer over to the original HP total? This solution has two big problems. One is that if the player took more damage than their base HP could handle, they would simply drop dead the moment the buff ends. The second problem is that this would make the buff useless either way, as it's not benefiting the player. Taking 30 damage during the buff would still remove 30 damage from their unbuffed HP, so what would be the point? Another solution is to not have any of the damage dealt to the bonus HP affect the base HP. In this scenario, the bonus HP acts more like a buffer, or a shield, or an overheal, a completely separate and temporary HP pool that gets drawn from first. If it doesn't get used, it doesn't add to the original HP when it wears off, but if it does take damage, it will only subtract from the original health pool once the bonus HP is completely depleted. A third solution, and the one Iron Mace decided on, is for things to work based on the percentage of health lost. This one is easiest to explain with an example. Let's say you have 100 HP normally, and you temporarily buff it to 200. Then you take 100 damage. Once the buff wears off, it checks to see what percentage of your buffed health is remaining. In this case, you have 100 out of 200 HP, which is 50% of your buffed HP total. Your original HP total is then multiplied by this percentage, leaving you with 50 out of 100 HP once the buff ends. With this solution, the HP buff is still a functional buff, increasing your survivability, but it's not nearly as powerful as having a flat HP buffer. With all of that out of the way, let's discuss what this means for Rage. Here's a quick table I created to show the effect of Rage on your base HP after taking damage. If Rage had no defense penalty, it would result in a defensive profit 100% of the time. It doesn't matter what damage you take, Rage will always leave you with more HP, and the more damage you take, the more HP it grants. If Rage worked this way, it would result in a clearly overpowered skill, boosting your damage, movement speed, and effective HP all at once. Clearly, the developers recognized this issue, and so the defensive penalty was instated. But how effective is this defense penalty? Is it enough to balance out the effective HP gained from Rage? The short answer is no. Kinda. There's an asterisk there. This is the original table I created when researching this. Every individual step of the process is outlined here, and the HP values are based on default Barbarian, who has 30 strength. 50% of 30 is 15, and 15 multiplied by 2 is 30, which means that Rage gives 30 bonus HP. We can see here that, after all is said and done, Rage leaves the Barbarian with slightly more HP than not using Rage. If I were to increase the damage dealt, this difference would become more significant. I also calculated this with toughness in mind, but the results were about the same. This is because toughness is a bonus to HP applied after strength is calculated, meaning that it'll have no impact on our end results, at least in terms of the difference between Rage HP and non-Rage HP. You can see here that in both cases, Rage ends with 0.75 more HP. Now, it'd be really easy to just call it here and say Rage is actually a defensive buff, but there's actually more to explore here. Remember, the HP you gain from strength is on a curve, and it's possible for Barbarian to outpace this curve by equipping gear with strength on it. So here's another, much more complicated table. Now that's beautiful. It may look like I just added some strength rows, but the real fun is that this table automatically calculates your base HP, using the game's HP formula. With this, we can easily see how your base strength impacts the effectiveness of Rage. The lower your base strength, the better of a defensive buff. Once we pass 40 strength, Rage actually causes you to take more damage in total, thanks to the HP curve. And once again, the more damage you take, the more significant the difference. Lower strength leaves you with even more HP, and higher strength leaves you with even less HP. And we see that 40 strength leaves us even. But why 40 strength? It's actually a lot simpler than you might think. At 40 strength, your base HP is 150, and Rage gives a bonus of 30 HP. 30 is 20% of 150, and you're taking 20% bonus damage. So it evens out perfectly. So is that our answer? Is Rage always profitable below 40 strength, perfectly even at 40, and detrimental above 40? Well, no, because there's another factor at play here. What about additional max HP from gear? Here it is, the table to end all tables. It's got bonus strength, additional max HP, and even max HP bonus, in case you're using toughness, Warcry, or you have it on your gear. Now, after playing with this table a whole bunch, I found that the rules for Rage are actually quite simple. If your Rage buffed HP is greater than 120% of your base HP, Rage will be profitable, and if it's less than 120%, then Rage will be detrimental. This includes flat HP from gear and HP gained from Rage. 120% is the magic number. Max HP bonus has absolutely no impact on whether Rage will be profitable or not. After all, 1.2 times X will always be 20% more than 1 times X. So there we have it. Rage is actually a tiny defensive bonus if your buffed HP is over 20% more than your base HP. At 20%, it breaks even, and less than that, you'll take slightly more damage. Of course, all of this is assuming that the defensive debuff really is just a flat 20% bonus damage taken. If it actually decreases your armor rating or your physical damage reduction, then things get a lot more complicated. You see, a reduction in 20% armor rating is not the same as 20% bonus damage taken. If you had 30% damage reduction, and it were reduced to 10%, you'd actually be taking 28% more damage. And this increase in damage taken only gets more drastic as your armor increases. There's no way for me to test if this is how it works in game, but let's run the numbers anyway. After testing, it's not actually that bad for Barbarian. In this case, the rule is pretty much just, Rage is always a slight net loss, with that loss getting slightly bigger if you have more strength and armor. Basically, the better your gear, the more Rage penalizes you, but it's never as bad as the 20% defensive penalty might have you think. So, regardless of which way it functions, whether it's a flat bonus to damage taken or a penalty to your armor, Rage's downside isn't as impactful as it suggests. The defensive penalty seems to just be there to offset the HP gain, and any extra damage taken is so small that it might as well not be considered a penalty at all, except in the most extreme of cases.